Playing an ambitious, narratively driven game is my favorite type of gaming experience, and the 7th console generation drew me in with adventures past the Omega 4 relay, or in the depths of Rapture, in a way that previous generations couldn't, and more recent generations haven't. I believe this era was the best mixture we've seen of creativity, technical capability, production budget, and risk-taking for the gaming industry. And those are all the same reasons why some of these games went hilariously wrong. And I love them for it. Welcome to User Error, the most self-explanatory show in gaming. I'm your host, Sam, and today, myth meets dumber myth in Legendary. Yes, I'm aware my copy looks like I dug it out of a creek 13 minutes ago. But that's how I found it, and I love it just the way it is. Legendary is a prime example of a 7th generation game that really tried. It was developed by Spark Unlimited, whose only prior credit was the first Call of Duty spin-off, Call of Duty Finest Hour, and published by Gamecock Media Group in North America, a company that existed for 20 months before being purchased and shut down. The game was published in Europe and Australia by Atari, though, so good for you guys. The game doesn't really waste much time with some guy named Charles Deckard, no relation to Rick, having already bypassed the security at a New York museum to find an ornate box. He immediately opens it with a rather distinct-looking key, intending to steal what's inside of it. Instead, the magic stuff happens and the box brands a signet on his left hand to thank him. All of a sudden, you take control of Charles and are supposed to escape the museum. Then a tutorial pop-up happens to mention that you just screwed with the literal Pandora's box. You know, the Pandora's box with all the crazy critters in it. Someone named Vivian talks at you while you escape the museum, and once outside you're greeted with the best cutscene in the entire game. The shockwave was so powerful it knocked out my internet. If you feel like you're missing context to any of this, it's because you are. The game literally starts with Deckard almost at Pandora's box, just like I said, but in the single-player menu, there is a prologue slideshow that you can watch acting like a recap of the previous game that doesn't exist. In said video, it talks about the myth of Pandora's box, which I assume you already know, and apparently, it's just been chilling at the bottom of some ocean until some divers found it and gave it to some museum. Vivian Kane, the disembodied voice already nagging at me, contracted Deckard for the Black Order. That's a name that clearly belongs to a group of upstanding citizens. People after my own heart. The Black Order is led by Ormond Le Fay, who wants the box. That's all we ever learn about him. Turns out Deckard is a professional thief whose moral compass points to his highest bidder. True protagonist material. I cannot come up with a reason as to why this video doesn't just open the game, considering they have other slideshow cutscenes in the same art style embedded into the campaign later on whenever they ran out of budget. So it's not like this would have been that out of place. But I digress. The game is an average-feeling first-person shooter with combat broken up by getting from point A to B, while scripted stuff happens all around you. Admittedly, that part this game does pretty well. After exiting the museum, you have to weave your way through New York while griffins wreak havoc, and it's entertaining to look at. Stuff crashes, griffins pick up cars and eat people, and stuff like that happens throughout the entire game. Unfortunately, you just can't interact with anything dynamic like that, and it's really disappointing. The actual combat is very linear, with the game's idea of variety only being some arena-like areas. After obtaining the fire axe and a pistol, the first weapons in the game, the first enemies you can fight are known as fire drakes. They're lava lizards that pop out of the subway, somersault around and barf at you. There's no trick to taking them down, you just shoot them. After dipping into the subway, I went right back up to street level as I was introduced to a feral naked mole rat. It was nice to meet you. On the surface, in keeping with every other shooter from this era, human soldier enemies also appear. These gentlemen are also employed by the Black Order, which wants to kill me now because I did exactly what they wanted me to do. I'm starting to wonder if these guys are as upstanding as I first thought. After meeting up with a nice police officer, I came face to face with the mole rat again. He disemboweled the nice police officer, and also he's actually a werewolf. My mistake. I shouldn't have assumed just because you looked like a cement-slathered scrotum with teeth. While the census I commissioned hasn't come back yet, I think werewolves were the most common supernatural enemy in the game. So they aren't exactly tough. They can be a little wily though, and they'll back up to throw things at you, or stand right in your face for a slap fight. Once you deliver enough damage to down one, you are required to decapitate it to actually kill it. Deep lore at play. At this point, the game continued to zigzag me between the streets, the subway, and the sewers, until I ran into Vivian. The Black Order promptly arrives and wants to kill her too now, because of something. And in order to be quote-unquote helpful, Vivian calls the Council of 98. Wouldn't you know it, the Council of 98 is the other highly moral secret society around that the Black Order splintered off from. And they had been keepers of Pandora's box a while back. They also wanted to kill us. Apparently we're that unlikable. But Vivian at least convinced them to kill the Black Order first. While we were screwing around in the subway, a giant golem had formed around Pandora's box out of random chunks of city, and was aimlessly meandering. The council shipped in 3 pulse generators to destabilize the golem and free the box. Naturally, I have to activate them all, probably because anytime our council allies go up against a mythical creature, they get instantly filleted. Before even reaching the first generator, you'll be introduced to the Nari, which according to legend, are the National Association of the Remodeling Industry. Look, I genuinely tried to research what these things are supposed to be, or even be based on, and the best thing I could come up with is that they're from a developer's bad drug trip or intense sexual perversion. I'm betting on the latter. They literally look like chubby birds with the heads of baby dolls. They squeal at you, turn intangible, possess inanimate objects to throw at you, are really irritating, and they kind of freak me out a little bit. But don't let them distract you from the monstrous tentacles reaching out of the sewer to give you a hug. On the bright side, about the time all of this is introduced, the shotgun first appears. The shotgun largely invalidates the rest of the weapon pool, as it's the most effective weapon against pretty much everything, except humans, oddly enough. That's pretty unrealistic, game, and I would know. Those 3 generators I mentioned earlier had to be filled up with animus energy, which is the juice I've been sucking out of the drakes, Nari, and were-rats. The animus energy is the mechanic in Legendary meant to make it stand out gameplay-wise. Deckard's Signet allows him to use it to either heal himself, create a weak stun pulse, mostly just effective on the Nari, or activate story objectives. That is totally it. The gameplay ramifications for the Signet are incredibly bland, which is why I haven't even bothered bringing them up yet. The Signet is more useful in the story cutscenes, and it's hinted that it can do more cool stuff later on, but over the course of the full campaign, nothing interesting is actually added. I just use it to refill my health about 90% of the time. My quest to activate the generators actually went pretty smoothly, besides being attacked by PepsiCo. The golem collapsed like my solar system diorama in 4th grade, and Pandora's box was free for the taking. Or at least it was until the ghost werewolves showed up. These werewolves function mechanically like the Nari, where they can turn intangible. Fortunately, also like the Nari, you can stun them back to this astral plane with a Signet Animus Pulse and introduce them to the business end of your shotgun. Their annoyance is rather short-lived too, since despite being pretty normal enemies, they never appear again in the rest of the game. After the council secured the box, they shipped it, along with Vivian and Deckard, over to jolly old London, to their secret clubhouse underneath the Parliament. The council began running tests on Deckard, but he didn't study, so he stowed away on a mission to the Black Order's secret research facility, conveniently also located in England. The mission turned into me wandering around a dingy town at night alone, so this whole level may have just been the aftermath of a night at the pub. We'll know for sure if the next level starts with me waking up in a ditch wearing a feather boa. The game took the opportunity of the dreary British night to introduce the alpha werewolf. It's a werewolf with a single puff of hair, so it looks even more like a... You know what? Never mind. They have more health than a stock model werewolf, but I think that's it. The level ends with a fairly atmospheric holdout at the end of a street along with other council survivors. There's even a belt-fed LMG available for Deckard for an extra dose of cinematic flair. It is shockingly weak against the attacking werewolves, though, so I didn't use it. The holdout ends with our rescue helicopter crashing, so that was productive. The next level starts with me waking up in a dilapidated building instead of a ditch, but still wearing a feather boa. The game's in first person, so you can't see it, but I assure you, it is there. I got it at this pet store last night. I also still had the LMG, which, like the other automatic weapons, was at least effective against the Black Order bozos interrupting my beauty sleep. Now that I'm awake, it's time to actually do the mission that we came here for, and launch an invasion on the Order's base, which is underneath the nearest cathedral. This level will trek you through the church grounds after leaving the nearby town, and the graveyards have a pleasant surprise for you. Your very own Minotaur. His name is Roger. The Minotaur runs around smashing things and soaking up buckshot like a sunbather soaking up skin cancer. It'll kill him eventually. The Minotaur is supposed to be weaker from the back, but since there's nothing to distract him and no way I found to sidestep him, I was stuck running in circles like at a track meet, turning around and firing off as many shells as I could at a time, like a track meet. Roger threw a gravestone at me, and I can't forgive that. Not wanting to be outdone, a griffin finally appeared in a scenario where I can fight back, and the encounter plays out almost exactly like the Minotaur fight I literally finished 10 minutes ago. At no point did the griffin take flight or acrobatically evade me, as I'd expect it to be able to do. It just saw me and charged, smashing up the sides of the building while I shot him copiously. After having the most time between introduction and combat, as well as being the most menacing creature in Legendary's backdrop, I genuinely expected more from this fight, and I should really know better. The Griffin added 0 new strategic challenges or mechanics. After all the cathedral invading, Deckard returns to London with a stolen hard drive of Black Order information. The Order was actually smart enough to leave malware on the hard drive to give away the location of the Council of 98's base and disable their security, but not smart enough to delete or falsify their actual plans on that same hard drive. Geez, these guys are brilliant. The Council learns of Ormond Le Fay's Animus creature mind control machine and its whereabouts, while the Order releases the Kraken. Yes, that one. Roars forth from the Thames directly onto Parliament, and Deckard has to take down the largest monster we've seen yet. Just a friendly reminder that Deckard is a white-collar art thief, and is also still wearing the same clothes from the beginning of the story, ripped coat sleeve and all. It's been days, has he not showered? And why am I so bothered by this? This was one of the most frustrating parts of the game. Not the Kraken, but the lead up to it. You have to loop all the way around Parliament with loads of Black Order soldiers in your way, and if you take too long, at about any given point, a griffin swoops onto the battlefield, and you have to have another mini-boss fight, sometimes with multiple successive griffins in the same stretch. Ammo, which has not been much of a concern throughout this game, becomes one here, since you can dump the entire ammo capacity of an LMG into a griffin without killing it. As a small consolation, the area does introduce the rocket launcher, which is capable of target lock-on and turning a griffin into paste with a single shot. But, since there's a segment towards the beginning of this mission that requires you to use the rockets to shoot down griffins out of the air, you know, the ones that aren't bothering you, you don't get much left to deal with the ones that do bother you when they pop up in between fighting the Black Order. At least to give me a break from fighting the griffins, I got to fight 2 Minotaurs at once in a library named Janice and William. The Order had left a miniature creature control device lying around unused too, that I could temporarily override with my own Animus energy. So Janice and William were kind enough to trample the Order soldiers before attempting to disembowel me. It was very sweet of them, and I wish them all the best. At the end of the mission, the Kraken itself was actually a huge pushover. The combat zone was littered with rockets, which could be locked onto the Kraken's tentacles until he finally opened his mouth for an explosive dentistry appointment. Oh, that'll teach you not to floss. The final stretch of the game takes place back in New York City, which is still destroyed from earlier. While not technically hard, the first part of this mission has you work your way across destroyed buildings while werewolves spawn persistently and limitlessly. It's really annoying when you're looking for items to trigger level progression. Also, flamethrower soldiers, not a fan. Down in the subway, because we're still doing that zigzagging thing, I found some sentient pimples, so that was exciting. And they spawned smaller zits that could move, so that was gross. Just like my teenage acne, I got rid of them using a flamethrower. If anyone knows what myth these pustules come from, please let me know, because the best I can come up with from my research would be God's Old Testament hemorrhoid plagues. Eventually, you meet up with the last council forces to lay siege to the Black Order's tower, that apparently no one took any notice of before Pandora's box was opened. It's quite large and obviously evil, and I doubt it sprang up overnight. Anyway, in the lobby, I met the last two Minotaurs, Barbara and Tenchi. They didn't like me. Playing the footage back, there was a rocket launcher on the ground that I really should have used to lessen my frustration. At least there's nothing that can add to it. I stand corrected. Indeed you do. After rummaging up the tower and killing Order goons, I freed Vivian from her holding cell so she could help me take down LaFay's machine. Oh, by the way, Vivian had been captured back in London, and I didn't mention it because I figured no one cared. This is LaFay's creature control machine, powered by Pandora's box itself. Unfortunately, we don't get another stupid easy boss fight to end the game. Instead, we have to shut down the 3 power regulator clusters. That's actually what the game calls them. And go shove animus energy back into Pandora's box to overload the doohickey. Wait, didn't the animus energy come out of the box? Why would putting it back overload it? Oh well, I'm clearly not a scientician. The arena is circular, with influxes of Black Order soldiers of different varieties, while a werewolf or two will perpetually drop into the fight. There are a few of the portable creature control machines around to give you a brief reprieve as the werewolves fight on your behalf. You push a button on all 3 clusters, and then the box becomes exposed. The box needed more energy to overload than I actually had. I was really hoping it just wanted a button press, so I ran to dump what I could and then hid in a corner as Ghost Werewolf showed up. Oh, I guess they did show up in the game again. I sucked their animus energy down and threw it right back up faster than my grandmother's cooking. As the final cutscene rolls, Legendary tries really hard to convince me that Ormond Le Fay dies. I don't buy it. I bet you good money that the big twist being saved for the sequel was that Ormond Le Fay was really the immortal wizard Morgan Le Fay. I don't know what I or anyone else will do with that information, but anyway, Pandora's box explodes and the Council of 98 shows up to kidnap Deckard, telling him that the signet contains instructions for a new box, which is mighty handy. Deckard escapes, however, into a world still infested with mythical creatures, where he tames a griffin buddy. Deckard is still wearing the same clothes, and it still bothers me. That's it. Game's done. Buy the sequel, which is totally coming out. You could play the multiplayer in the meantime, though. Yep. This game has a multiplayer mode, which according to the internet is focused around gathering animus energy into your team's machine, while killing other players only as an inconvenience. I couldn't get footage for that though, because the game refuses to let you load in with one player, and I don't know a single other soul who owns this game. In fact, I might be the only person who survived playing it. In summary, Legendary is anything but. The Pandora's box premise is neat, but the story is generic and the characters are all completely forgettable. The gameplay is subpar, without much to string you along. All of the mythical creatures are bullet sponges, with nothing more than a single animus pulse to mix them up mechanically. The game still feels like effort was there, with some strong event scripting around the levels for a game of this era. Yet, the cutscenes are really bland, even when they aren't the slideshow ones, and it seems like those could have been balanced out a bit. Ultimately, unless you're into obscure shooters like I am, you can definitely pass on Legendary.